We just adjourned. He knows who he's dealing with. We waited for you.
Hey, Paul.
Are you sure? Yeah.
So I'm over here trying to your glad.
Let us know when you're ready, Paul. And with that, we will call to order the meeting of the Property Tax Consultants Advisory Council meeting. Today is Wednesday, January 23rd. And now do a roll call and certify that we do have a quorum. Steve Mills, present. Mr. Stephen Dunson.
Present.
Mr. Bill Green.
Present.
Ms. Deborah Baucom.
Present.
Mr. Ken Parsons.
Present.
And Mr. Paul Pennington.
Present.
And it should be noted, Mr. Mitchell Katin is not with us today. And with that, we do have a quorum. That will close out item B and move us to item C, which is training for board members, covering three topics: Open Meetings Act, the Public Information Act, and the Administrative Procedure Act. And Mark, we appreciate you bringing us up to date on that and keeping our minds in the right path on not breaking the law.
I'll do my best. Mark Gladney, General Counsel's Office.
That's right.
Mark Gladney, General Counsel's Office, for the record. Today's overview that we're going to do, Advisory Council training, as we said, is going to be on the Open Meetings Act, the Administrative Procedures Act, and the Public Information Act. You can find these in the Government Code, Chapters 551 and 552, and the Administrative Procedures Act is under Chapter 2001. This is just going to be an overview of the law. It's not going to be anything that's majorly substantive. If you do want to take training on these areas, you can go to the AG's website. They have a 1-hour video. And at the completion of that video, you get a nice little certificate that you can frame and brag to all your friends that you took that course. You won't get that here today. We thought about maybe a written test for you guys. I had to talk Mary Winston out of that. So the purpose of this legislation here is basically to put some sunshine, transparency on governmental body activity. And you're going to hear those words, transparency and sunshine, quite a bit throughout this presentation. Okay. The Open Meetings Act, we're going to start with that. Again, it's meant to ensure open and transparent government. The Act requires that the meetings of governmental bodies, such as yourself, be open to the public, and also what you're going to discuss, there'd be public notice of the time, place, and subject matter of the meeting. And the terms of the act are mandatory. Okay, in order to have actually be under the Open Meetings Act, we're going to go through a few of the elements. You need a quorum. Quorum being the majority of the members of the advisory council as fixed by rule or statute. In this case, we have 7, so quorum would be 4. Okay? If we don't have a quorum, then you all can still carry on a meeting, but you just can't take any official action. Okay? Another element of the Open Meetings Act is deliberation or discussion. Just simply means just verbal exchanges amongst the council regarding issues that are within the jurisdiction of this particular council. So in this case, it would be dealing with matters of import to property tax consultants. Another element is a meeting. What is a meeting under the Open Meetings Act? It occurs anytime a quorum, so at least 4 of you, of a governmental body engages in deliberation or discussion regarding business or public policy over which you have jurisdiction, or any time that you take formal action over an issue in which you have jurisdiction. The next element is notice. The Act requires that we provide to the general public the date, time, place, subject matter of what's going to be discussed amongst any governmental body. The way we do that, we put out an agenda, which you're familiar with. And the notice must be filed with the Secretary of State at least 7 days prior to the meeting and posted online, which we do on our website. Now, important, the agenda is your roadmap. You can't really discuss anything that's outside the four corners of the roadmap agenda. Otherwise, that would be a violation of the act. Now, when the act applies and when it doesn't apply. What if you're out at a social function, there happens to be a quorum of you at some type of property tax consultant convention or workshop, and y'all are there. It's not a formal meeting. It's not one that's been noticed, time and place and all that. Can you actually go to these meetings? Can you engage in these meetings? Can you meet in an informal setting under the Open Meetings Act? Yeah, you can. You just can't discuss or engage in discussion about board business or take any formal action. Now, you can have discussions that are incidental to the event that you happen to be at, but as far as anything that would be on the agenda or some issue that comes up before this board must be discussed here. So, some points to remember. When you are in a situation like that, always be aware if there's a quorum. Be aware of any situation occurring outside of a properly called and noticed meeting. What you're discussing, try to stay away from discussing any business that's associated with what the Property Tax Consultants Advisory Council does. Do not engage in substantive conversations related to committee business or policy when a quorum is present and you're outside of a regularly scheduled meeting. And stay away from a walking quorum. Now, you're probably familiar with what a walking quorum is. Walking quorum occurs when there's fewer than a quorum of members that engage in discussions about official business over which the board or committee has jurisdiction. That's a no-no. Now, while fewer than a quorum participate in the conversation, subsequent conversation with other members who weren't a part of that original discussion, that can be a walking quorum, and that's improper. So, we have an example here. 7-member advisory council, such as yours. 3 members get on the phone and they start talking and emailing thoughts about an upcoming agenda item and exchange information. Okay? At that point, maybe everything is okay. But one of you decides to go and start talking to somebody else and shares that information. At that point, it's improper. It's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. That's a walking quorum. And that is just a big no-no, and we are strongly advising that you don't do that. So these are some of the examples where walking quorums can occur. And the big one that you should be aware of is right here. Emails, text messages, and other new technologies. And by other new technologies, we're talking about social media. So, you can have, the chair can have his own Twitter page. And all 7 of you, or 6 of you, are followers on the Twitter page. He starts discussing an item of business that's germane to the council and within their jurisdiction. Well, that's being broadcast to all of you. Yeah, that would constitute basically a walking quorum because it's discussion outside of a regularly noticed meeting about an issue over which the council has jurisdiction. That's a walking quorum. That would be a no-no. So you got to be careful if you do have Facebook pages and Twitter pages and Snapchat and all the other rest of those things out there, not to discuss advisory council business on those particular meetings because you can be in violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Council members, rest assured, I will never have a Twitter page.
I have Twitter. It's fun.
For some people.
Okay, so these are the best practices to avoid the walking quorum, and I basically already talked about that. Not meeting in small groups to discuss committee business, sending emails or text messages, to quorum of members regarding official business, of course, being involved in social media and disseminating that information where there could be a quorum of members on that same medium. And then the bottom one here, asking a quorum of members, even on an individual basis, for feedback on committee business outside the public meeting. That's polling. That's another violation. Do not do that. So these are the things not to do. And I think you all have a handout, has exactly the same things. It'd be good to just kind of scan that from time to time if you have any questions in your mind. Again, you're limited to discussing the specific items on the agenda. So just think of the agenda as basically your table of contents, your roadmap, your instructions. You need to stay within the four corners of the agenda. We have a public comment option. Members of the public can come and speak about any item, whether it's on the agenda or it's not on the agenda. And you're free to set reasonable limits for that public comment. Usually 2 to 3 minutes is the norm. It's whatever you think is appropriate. However, once again, any item that's not on the agenda that's raised during public comment, you cannot respond to, other than saying, hey, I think I want to put that as a agenda item on a future committee meeting. You can certainly do that. You may even be able to ask a clarifying question or two, but for the most part, during the public comment session, you simply are not allowed to respond or engage in discussion on an item that's not on the agenda. Okay, again, this is best practices. We've been through a few of these already, so I don't think it's necessary to repeat on that. Now, what happens if you violate the Open Meetings Act? Okay, there are civil remedies, and any person, including the media, may petition the courts to stop actions taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. And the Open Meetings Act specifically states that the action taken is voidable. It's not void from the time it happens, but it can be voided by a court of competent jurisdiction if somebody brings it to their attention in a lawsuit. And this also has some criminal penalties attached to it, too. The main thing here is members who knowingly conspire to circumvent the Open Meetings Act are subject to misdemeanor criminal penalties. So the key here is knowingly. And if that were to be proven, the penalties are a fine and or up to 6 months in jail. I've been practicing for over 30 years. I've never seen this happen before, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't. So we live in strange times these days, so it's just be careful. Okay, again, best practices, avoid communications that involve a quorum of members outside of a regular meeting, and confine your discussions to what's on the agenda roadmap. And if you feel inclined to look some of this stuff up, here's the links. You have them on your little handout. Links to the Attorney General's website, as well as if you want to reference the Government Code chapter on open meetings. If you have any questions on that, there's our phone number. Okay, next we're going to move on to the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, the APA is what governs the rulemaking process that TDLR uses and every other administrative agency in the state of Texas, designed to establish minimum standards of practice and procedure for those agencies when we're in the rulemaking process. And this is the definition of a rule. The rule basically implements laws that are passed by the Texas legislature. A rule can be an amendment of an existing rule, or it can be even a repeal of a prior rule. And these are the sources for rulemakings, where the ideas come from for rules. Okay? And you can see they come from a myriad of different places, even from the general public through rule petitions. So a member of the public could file a petition for a rulemaking, give their idea, and that could be the source of a brand-new rule. And these are interested parties who want to do something like that. Can be a business entity all the way up to a private person. Okay, and this is basically the rulemaking process. You know, again, it starts with an idea for a rule, goes through this process. Once we get some draft rules, they're filed with the Texas Register. There's a 30-day comment period, as you're familiar with. We review the comments, recommend any rule changes. It comes back to you. If you're satisfied with the rule as it is, you would recommend adoption to the commission of the rule, and it would go to the commission, and ultimately the commission would go with the recommendation. Sometimes as it's proposed, sometimes there might be some changes. The adoption is filed with the Texas Register to notice the public that here, we got a new rule here, and 20 days after filing it becomes effective. And in fact, we'll be doing something like that today, I think on agenda item G, asking for you to adopt rule changes that have been made there. Okay, and every 4 years we go through our rules and we review them to see if there's still rules that are needed. That's required by statute. This is the process that we go through for the rule review. And again, here are some resources that you can use regarding the rulemaking process, what the statutes are, what the rules are, where you can find additional information on the Secretary of State's website. And again, if you have any questions, there's our number down there below. And the last thing we're going to cover is the Public Information Act, also known as the Open Records Act. And again, it's allow anyone to get information about the affairs of government. It's again dealing with transparency and sunshine and how government operates. The Act makes all documents, records, and other information relating to official business open to the public. There are some exceptions, though. We're not going to go through all those exceptions because there's a lot of them. Yeah. But public information includes any electronic information created, transmitted, received, maintained on any device if it's in connection with official business. And why am I emphasizing any device? That also means your own personal electronic devices. So you must be careful about what it is that you put on your own personal devices that relate to the official business of the Property Tax Consultant Advisory Council. I would suggest not using your personal devices for that kind of situation, because if we get a request asking for information relating to the official business of the Property Tax Consultant Advisory Council, we're going to be asking if it come from all sources, including your private devices. I'm sure you don't want to give those up, so be very careful about what it is that you put on your private devices. And this is the process that we go through when we get a PIA request. Request is received by us. We will, if necessary, forward the request to you, to ask you if you have any information that would be germane to the request. There's a 10-day turnaround period. We can't ask why the person wants the records. We can ask for clarifications if it's a real broad request or it's a confusing request. We can certainly ask for clarifications on that. And then here are some of the exceptions to disclosure, like date of birth, email, certain educational documents, medical history documents under HIPAA is also excluded. And that information would be redacted from anything that we were to turn over to the requester. And last, this is all the information, the resources references that you can use to get more information on the PIA. And again, there is a video that you can take on all these if you want more specific information. And again, this is our number. You can contact us. And our email address in the event that one of you all might have an open records request that you might want to file. That's where all the requesters send the request right through there. It's routed to our open records people, and they start processing. So that's pretty much the quick little overview on those three acts. They're very important. I don't want you to think that because this was a very short presentation that they're not important. Each one of them is vitally important, and they work individually and in concert with one another so that people have confidence in the way that the governmental bodies, agencies are conducting the people's business. That's it.
Anyone have any questions of Mark on this? Mark, thanks for refreshing our memories on protocol and transparency and keeping us lawful.
Not a problem.
Technology's changed a lot of that, just as our roles here on the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That concludes item C, which will move us to item D, which is approval of the minutes from our last meeting of October 10th, 2018. And I will note there was one small change that was brought to our attention, and it was just an acronym from the PTP to PTC on the third from the bottom notation there. But if I can entertain a motion on approval of those minutes. If you've had a chance to review those.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Ken Parsons and a second from Ms. Deborah Bockham to approve. Can I get a vote, please?
Aye.
Aye. And approval of the minutes has been passed. And that moves us to item E, which is a public comment section. Is there any person wishing to speak or address the advisory council complete a public comment form, which we have none? So we will move on to staff reports. Item F, which is licensing division statistics.
Good morning.
Morning.
Tarsha Red, licensing manager for the property tax consultant program. And as you can see from the report in front of you, we have maintained a consistent population in general for our property tax licenses. It seems to be slightly lower numbers when you look at the senior property tax consultants and the combined licenses, but that's just a matter of renewals. So as renewals come in, those numbers will fluctuate. So you're looking at people that their renewals are pending, so they may not show active right now. And you look at numbers later, you'll see an increase, because we've seen a huge increase in the number of applications and renewals that have come in just this month. So those numbers will change as the population continues to grow. So it's not a huge jump, like it's not going to be hundreds, but there is a slight change and a little bit of an increase in the number of the people that have been renewing lately.
Tarsha, do you keep any demographics on that population? Like how many are, what age groups or gender or anything like that?
No, we don't.
Well, I see all the senior tax consultants, means like there's a lot of old tax consultants. Some being right here.
Not exactly what that means, but okay.
Just an observation. It's probably illegal to even keep demographics on stuff like that
Well,
in today's world.
that's not something that we necessarily need.
Yeah.
There are questions on the application that ask for that, and that's just to be able to identify them in our database, so that if that person applies for another license, we don't have to enter their information again, but it's not something that we maintain as far as keeping the numbers for the licensed population.
Well, it's not going backwards, so it's not a.
Definitely not going backwards. Like I
Actually,
said, we have a
yeah.
nice increase in renewals that have come just in this month. And so there is a little bit of an increase in the populations, not just a huge jump, but there is an increase. So it's definitely not going down.
So,
Sure.
This is Deborah Balcom. I have a question. So as we get into our later agenda item, and if we end up adopting the 2-year cycle, are we going to adjust these reports to kind of, because I think we'll see then a giant dip in renewals if they go to a 2-year cycle. So
I don't-
adjust the reports to show 2-year renewals?
I don't know that the renewal cycle will affect the population.
Okay, right, but just as far as renewals each year, theoretically would be cut in half.
Mary Winston,
Well-
we would change the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would just change the report. And Mr. Mills, for your question on age demographics, something we could probably pull, it's not our major concern, or not an initial concern, but we have a lot of associations with some of our other programs that do pull that information. And they know that their demographic is majority age, whatever, and over, and they use that to recruit at different schools, and that may not be for this program, but those numbers are attainable, and typically associations do get that number just to keep up with their profession.
How would I request that? Could I just make the request now, or just do a separate request?
We'll chat afterwards, but we'll make a note of it.
Okay.
And you're just trying to kind of find out,
Yeah, where we're headed?
you're thinking your profession's getting older?
I know it is.
Okay,
I know it
okay.
is. And
Okay.
don't y'all agree? I mean,
Yeah.
so, I think there's a need to recruit.
I think the new licensing classes have been filling, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been interesting to see how many new
That's good.
licensees are coming into the classes, but it would be a good thing to see and know.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could probably leverage it in a way that would help our industry.
Okay, and that is what other industries have
Yeah.
done through their associations to try to get more younger people involved, more younger professions, so, professionals, so, okay, yeah.
But yeah, that would be great information.
We can do that.
And would love to share it with our advisory board and see how we can leverage it to our
Okay,
benefit.
all right, sounds good.
That
Sorry for
sounds
interrupting.
good. But thanks for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Okay. Any additional questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tasha. And so that takes us to item 2 of staff reports, Customer Service Division.
Good morning, board members. My name is Misty Maldonado de Leon. I am the Customer Service Manager for this program. So my staff report, basically statistics. As you can see, we have a trend of more contacts going up as the year progresses, or has ended, actually. It's equally, this statute, or this program, they like to email and contact, and a call equally as much. So we would like to promote more emails for this program, just because it's a little more intricate detail when they have their questions. So if they could email at cs.property.tax.consultants. We also offer a help@TDLR email address while they're holding on the phone. So that's also another option. We do have callback feature as well when they're holding. And I would recommend they sign up for email updates as well on the website, so they get recent, developments, changes to the laws and rules, or important notices and upcoming meeting notices.
Yeah, I find that's most helpful for me personally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. And if you don't have any questions, that concludes my report today.
Thank you. Anyone? Thank you, Missy.
You're welcome.
Item 3, Enforcement Division, with some statistics.
Good morning, board members. My name is Rebecca Scove-Burkhalter. I'm a prosecutor for the Enforcement Division, and I have your Enforcement Division report. So as you'll see on the report, there's some key statistics for the entire combined fiscal year of 2018. And then on the lower half of the page are the key statistics for just the beginning of November fiscal year of 2019. So you can see for fiscal year 2018, the number of cases opened for the property tax consultants program was 16 total out of a total of 10,585 cases opened at TDLR. And then the cases resolved were 6 for this program, 1 agreed order, and then the penalties assessed were $6,500, and then the total amount of penalties collected were just over $1,000. And then, like I said at the bottom, there's some key statistics for just the very beginning of fiscal year 2019. So 2 cases were open. They have not been resolved yet. We don't have any agreed orders yet, and no penalties assessed or collected so far for this fiscal year. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, this is Paul Pennington. I have a question. Is it because you have 10,585 cases open that the process takes a long time to resolve?
I'm not sure that that's directly related. My understanding is that this program is complaint-based, so it depends on the time it takes to investigate the complaint. So we need to receive the complaint. It goes to it starts out at intake first, then it goes to an investigator, and then finally it goes to a prosecutor. And so I don't think that's exactly why they haven't.
Rebecca, if I could, Carla James,
Please do.
TDLR. And I think Karen may have something to add, but it may look like it is taking a while, but we have an average case resolution of only 142 days. So what may look like it's taking a long time isn't necessarily doing so. These are stats from the Enforcement Division as a whole that include all 39 programs. So we can give you specifics on what's going on in your profession, but as a whole, I think our enforcement group is moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, so if you look at it like on a relative basis, say there's 4,000 cosmetologists, you might have 50. I'm not.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not-
we
I'm
have
just-
800,000 licensees.
Yeah.
And you
We're
can.
1,800 of that, right?
Well,
Yes, approximately.
yes, approximately, but out of 10,000 cases last year, it's a very small percentage for your profession. And some of the longer wait times may not be associated with your profession. Most of our enforcement cases are done by a complaint basis or an internal referral basis based upon inspections or things that are seen out in the field. And all of that combined gives us the turnaround time of 142 days. But I can't speak specifically to your profession, and Karen may be able to do so.
Karen Cox, senior prosecutor, and Carla said everything I was going to. That it may be possible, but I don't know if it would be, but that our numbers are, as she said, that 142 days is the enforcement division as a whole. So,
Well, I was asked by Senator Betancourt in 16 to find out how long it took, and it did take a while. And so now we're in 19, and I'm personally experiencing it's taking a lot longer than 140 days. So I just, my question was very innocent. Is it just because there's 10,000 cases over there, and it's a situation where there's just so many people working on it, and that's why it takes so long? But what you're telling me is they typically, in the whole universe, the 10,000 universe, they get it's done fairly quickly. But I don't know if that, it was not true in 16, because I sent a letter here because I was asked to do it by him. And I have personal knowledge of 2.
Mr. Pennington, we would be so happy to discuss this with you after the meeting, get some specifics from you, and
I trust that the 2 that I have personal knowledge of are being worked on. I just want to know, is it going to be a year?
well, and again,
Or
it
2
depends on the
year?
case that we need to look at. Some of these things work
One
through
of the
very quickly.
cases
And
that I have personal knowledge is of somebody who had the largest fine ever set forth, so.
Okay, so Mary Winston, I know who that is. So this was my program when I was a prosecutor here. And thank you for not giving those names, but we all know who that is. So It depends. It does depend on the different type of case. Everything does start off in our intake, and it's processed, and
Well,
some
I
cases
can
are quicker than
call
others.
I can call them later. and
Yeah,
give me
yeah.
That's cool. I was
Yeah.
just asking a generic question.
And Mr. Pennington, that may be a special, we'll see. You know, I haven't looked at that because that's a unique sort of situation now,
Okay.
wasn't it? Yes. And I spoke at Tap Tap several years ago, and Senator Betancourt was there and visited with him, and you guys are great typically, but when I tell you have a bad actor, sometimes you can have a bad actor who has been trying to do much greater things, right? But let me look into it, and we'll chat about it later. I'm familiar.
Okay.
This is Stephen Dunson. I was wondering, can you guys provide this type of data for our counterparts at property tax professionals? Because I'm trying to see, like Paul is, what's the average turnaround on a property tax professional case versus a property tax consultant case? Does that make sense? If there's a difference at all, I don't know.
It may be just a freedom of information request for something like that.
Well, I was hoping to get some chart like this for property tax professionals as well. I know you guys don't have it, but right
Oh.
now, but if you guys could prepare, that'd be great.
The
Statistics.
these reports are standardized.
Okay.
So it's going to be similar, the same categories across all programs.
That'd be great. Maybe next
We
meeting.
don't have the date, the average time of resolution on the report.
But Mary Winston again, Chris Russey is listening from upstairs, and he just messaged me a nice chart, which we can make available to you because it's public information. And in his message, thanks, Chris, he does say that it does take, your cases are not if the foot tub was dirty. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not an inspection-based case that is a checklist of certain things as some of our cosmetologist cases would be. It's going to be more in depth, and he says that they do typically take a little bit longer. But, so to answer your question, yes, but that's the complexity of the world that the profession that you live in. And we don't want to take too long, but we definitely want to take long enough. So we'll make sure we get that to you. Thanks, Chris.
Stephen Dunsky, I can say you guys are very good about every quarter sending out a letter to remind you, hey, yeah, we still know you have a case
Yep.
pending. Here's your prosecutor. You know, so I do get those, but I'm with Paul. It's taken quite a bit longer than I thought it ever would.
And that's on cases that you've filed
Yeah.
against someone else, yeah?
It's
And
taken
this
a lot
is-
longer.
This is Karen Cox, Senior Prosecutor. I want to point out something, that there are two different, I think when you talk about cases, we need to distinguish between the cases where there's a complaint, it's investigated and reviewed by a prosecutor, and then closed. That deadline is much more within the control of the Enforcement Division. In cases where we get large fines, usually that's a case that involves going to the State Office of Administrative Hearings. If the respondent requests a hearing, if we think there's a violation, and we issue an initial letter, it's called a notice of alleged violation, and please remember that word alleged in there, then the respondent has a chance to request a hearing. If they request a hearing, that is those deadlines suddenly become much less amenable to Enforcement Division control, because we have to request a hearing date at another agency, we have to schedule it with the ALJ's availability. The respondent also has the right to discovery. It's much more like a civil trial. And those cases take a really long time. SOA, the minimum, there's an amount of time, usually 30 days with the notice of alleged violation. If they request a hearing within that time, there's a minimum amount of time that we have to give to request for a notice, to send out a notice of hearing. So there are deadlines set by the Administrative Procedure Act that we have to follow, and then there are also deadlines imposed by SOA by availability of ALJs. So most of our cases don't take very long because most of our cases are resolved without having to go through litigation. If it goes through litigation, that's a different matter, and those are much longer.
So really, to
So-
paraphrase, It depends on the amount or the brevity of the violation on how much brain damage there is, and therefore the length of time it's going to take. So
I don't know if the word brevity of violation is a good description. The complexity of the violation,
Yeah.
of the alleged
Yeah.
violation makes a big
Okay.
difference. The amount of documents involved, the extent to which the respondent reacts to it makes a difference. And there's a lot of variables involved in an enforcement case that can, and if all of them fall wrong, the case can take more than a year. And if all of them fall right, it can take a couple of weeks.
I'm sorry to be interrupted.
No, please, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, some of the repeat offenders, they know how to play the game and know how to drag it out as well. So, anyway, that's just a observation. So, does that answer everybody's questions?
I have a question. Ken Parsons. When you're investigating or it's turned over to the prosecutor, does the complainant, the person filing the complaint, get, I noticed what Mr. Dunstan just said, that he's been updated on the status or what have you. Is that true in every case? If you file a complaint, do you get an update on some regular basis, or do you know what stage it's at, basically the status? So.
With the caveat that we have some programs that have what are called super confidentiality provisions, that notice is different from those. The property tax consultants is not one of those programs. Everybody gets what's called a quarterly letter. Both the complainant and the respondent will get a letter, and it's computer generated. No one touches it. It has an electronic signature. It has the prosecutor's name printed on it and contact information. Yeah, as long as it's not filed anonymously. If we know who the complainant is, we would notice.
Right,
But
so
thank you,
does that
Rebecca.
start, pardon me, but does that start from the day you file the complaint, and it gets in your, what do you call it, your intake, or does it start in the beginning, and then every quarter or so you
Yes,
get an update?
and that's a question I should be able to answer off the top of my head, but I can't. I can get back to you with how the quarterly letters work, and I will do that.
Very good.
On the one that, I will say, the one that I have filed on someone, I've actually gotten a personal phone call and the letter from your division, which I thought was great and appreciated.
Mr. Chairman, Carla James. It sounds like we have an opportunity here to provide some training on how our process works in enforcement, is what I'm hearing. So if I can make the recommendation or suggestion that when we get to item H, that we add that to your agenda for next time. And that may provide a good bit of clarity for you on how that work runs through our enforcement division. So if you're open to that, we can certainly add it.
Oh, that would be awesome. We will add that.
And I think I just probably bought myself a couple of flat tires by saying that.
You hang with a rough crew, so.
Man, you know, us numbers people were dangerous.
This is Mark Gladney, General Counsel's Office. Having done enforcement work in the past myself with other agencies, it's not entirely all that common, at least the ones that I've worked for, that a complainant would get a status letter on a complaint that person had filed. Especially if they were somebody that wasn't needed as a witness in a case. Last agency I worked for, we would only notice the complainant after the case had been taken care of. And sometimes the outcome would not necessarily be what the complainant wanted, but it was basically what was worked out between the agency and the respondent. So this is a service that I haven't seen that often in my experience.
Yeah, this is Ken Parsons. I think the process, I was going to mention that, you beat me to it again, Carla. Having us understand that process a little bit better, probably, we need some more education. I know I do, because I don't quite understand how based off of Paul's question and how long he perceives that it takes, maybe we need to understand that process a little bit better, and, that'd probably help a lot, so.
I think this is a good opportunity for us to provide some insight into our process.
Rebecca, one quick question, as a non-lawyer, what is the huge difference between an agreed order and cases resolved, and a case resolved?
Could be agreed on.
Well, my understanding is that there are basically three main ways that a case can be resolved by a final order. Another way is to do a warning letter or a closing letter, depending on if that's appropriate for the particular
Right.
case. Sometimes you'll receive a complaint from a complainant who alleges a violation that, in the prosecutor's eyes, is not a violation
Right.
of the rules or statutes. So sometimes that'll result in a closing letter. But as far as the orders go, one solution is a default order. Another is an agreed order where they agree with us to pay a fine, usually, and settle. And the other one is a commission order where the case actually has to go to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, go before an administrative law judge, receive the SOA judge's proposal for decision, and then it needs to go to the commission for a final order. So that's a little bit, some of the difference between some of those.
And is there any, priority on, is it just, are they based on when they come in? On when and how they're heard and, I guess, worked, for lack of a better term?
Sure, it depends on the prosecutor's workload, too.
Okay. So it's pretty much just up to the prosecutor on what they want to make a priority, and they push maybe the smaller things that look like it just be a.
Well, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah. This is Karen Cox again. It would be more or less up to the prosecutor to handle their own workload.
Okay.
There are some guidelines that we have, but mostly, yes, it is up to the prosecutor.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. And is there anything else, anyone? Rebecca, thank you. Thank you both for your time, and all the information is very, very good.
You're
Good
welcome,
job,
thank
ladies.
you.
And Carl, I appreciate you suggesting the training, because I think it would help us all. And with that, we'll move to F4, Education Examination Division.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. My name is Lorraine Strofe, and I'm with the Education and Examination Division. You should have your report in front of you. If you'll notice on the first page, we have started providing some information on audits that we're conducting. We have an auditor that is responsible for auditing all of the continuing education providers. In 2018, those numbers were included in that paragraph of the 69 total. But if you'll notice in the graph, it only provides you the numbers for 2019, which was 25. If you'll notice, we haven't done any audits on property tax consultants yet, but that is on his agenda to complete next, all of those that have not had any audits done yet. Those audits are done on classroom and online providers, both.
Lorraine, how many providers do we have right now for our CDs?
For yours, currently, I pulled the numbers this morning to see, so I could give you that information. There are 18 providers with actual courses that have been approved. 18. We have a few providers that are still on that list, but they don't have any courses right now. So there's 18, and if you'll notice over in your report, there's currently 37 courses out there that are being provided by those 18 providers. The Institute for Professionals has the most currently that they're out there providing. Most of your others only have one course. And we also have the examination statistics for you, which if you'll notice on the percentages there's and numbers, it's remaining current. Of course, for 2019, we only have one quarter. So it takes a little bit more information for those to level out, but it is remaining consistent. And the pass-fail rates have been provided broken down for you, as well as that continuing education information that I had just shared. I'll give you a moment to look over that and see if you have any other questions.
Is the pass-fail rate pretty standard for most industry exams? such as this?
It is consistent with some of our other industries. You have to keep in mind that that information will fluctuate depending upon the program's totals. So if you look at the number of exams that are administered for property tax consultants, that's a lot smaller number than, for example, what we would provide in cosmetology. So each number, every time you add another applicant to take an exam, that affects your statistics. So if you only had 2 people take an exam and one passed and one failed, that of course is 50%. But if you added more numbers in there, that percentage is going to change immediately.
And that 237 is both senior and regular exams?
Yes, that is all the exams. And another thing you want to consider is the fact that if you have someone that fails an exam, then they have that opportunity to come back and take an exam again. So these numbers of those of the fail portion could be the same individual or a couple individuals that are continuing and trying to pass that exam. So there's a lot of factors that you have to look at.
So this is Deborah Baucom. Do we have statistics on that breakout of retakes versus first time? Versus
No. And we can certainly check with our vendor, PSI is the one who administers the exams, but I'm not sure how attainable that would be since they strictly go by numbers. They each are assigned an individual ID number, but that is certainly something I could check and see if that would be a possibility of providing that. I'll go ahead and make a note of that.
I appreciate that. That
Sure.
would just be interesting to know if we have one person that's taking it 50 times versus
Right.
50 people taking it once.
Right.
Just-
You know, this is Ken Parsons. One of the things, questions that popped into my head was how does that pass-fail ratio change? Say, how has it changed over the, say, last 10 years?
10 years?
Yeah, I mean, are we getting better? Are we getting worse?
Even if I went back to 15, which that's as far back as I went today, they were consistent. The percentages did not fluctuate. But I could certainly go back farther if you would be interested in seeing a larger span, and I could get that information for you as well.
I'm
Would
just
you-
curious if our industry is getting better.
Right.
Is the exam still is acceptable to be at what seems to be a pretty low pass-fail ratio? Is that normal? Is that something that we should be concerned about?
Well, 50%, I mean, that's not, I wouldn't consider that as something to be concerned with as much as if it was 75% fail rate. That would probably be more concerning and something that you would want to have the subject matter experts to look at during that exam review. And if I'm not wrong, were you on that committee? That's what I thought. So those would be that would be an opportunity when you would want to be concerned, and you would look at some of the questions, get that breakdown of those that are answered easily or those that are compared that are being missed more frequently, and compare that between, of course, the person that passed the exam compared to the person that failed. So that would be a percentage that I would feel would probably be a little bit more concerning than 50%. 50%, that's half of your industry that has taken an exam. And remember, that's just to evaluate their minimum competency. If you have someone that's coming in to be a consultant that has more experience in the field, especially assisting someone, then they're going to have a little bit more knowledge, which makes it easier for them to pass the exam beyond just the training that they've had education-wise.
Yeah, well, I asked the question because I know at one time, many years ago, I remember someone saying, you know, you got to be careful not to pull up the ladder.
Right.
Keep other people from getting in the industry.
Right.
So, you know, as long as something in the 50% range is acceptable, then I think we're fine, so.
Okay.
I think the higher fail ratio has to do with the provider. Because if there's
Sure.
somebody who's doing a lousy job and doesn't prepare them for the test, they're gonna fail. So that skews it a little bit too. And I think
It
10 years
does.
ago, the pass ratio in our industry was way high, or maybe more than 10 years ago, it was way high. And that, at that time, we started revamping, you know, the test and stuff like that.
It's the difference between 251.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good statistic to see if we had that data available, just because
Take those numbers.
Sure.
It's 251.
I'll be glad to get that for you.
I appreciate that. Thank
Was
you.
the 237. That's the difference. I think I figured it out. I think there's probably 20 that retook it, because if you look at the total quarters.
Of applicants?
Yeah, there was 251, and then if you look what actually for fiscal year for 2018 was 237.
Yes.
So that delta is probably what it is.
You're,
wrong, but-
I mean, that would.
That would make sense.
Considering the information you have right here, that would be a good, I would probably agree with that as well.
And I was using the new math.
Right.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else? Thank you, Lorraine.
You're welcome.
Very
Thank
good
you.
information. And that leads us to item 5, F5, Regulatory Program Management Division, Public Outreach. The loneliest guy in the,
No. Good morning, Chairman and board members. My name is Russell Tolley. I'm in the RPM division. I'm here to let you know that I'm available to answer questions. For all those people listening on the internet, you can contact me. I'd like to give some kudos to our customer service representatives that work here now. They do a great job of filtering in that first line of answering questions for this program. Occasionally, they do pass on a question on to me if it's something they're not aware of or don't know the particulars of the case. So that's one thing I do. I'm also available for participating in any industry gatherings you might have or conferences. If sometimes I participate by having an informational booth, letting people have an opportunity to meet somebody from TDLR face-to-face if they have questions or comments they want to give to us. I'd be happy to participate with that. You can contact me or any of my bosses, or Charlotte Melders, my immediate boss, and the director is here, David Gonzalez, and his deputy director, Lee Parham. So we'd be happy to participate in any of those gatherings.
Russell, I'm going to give your information to the chairman with IBT that holds monthly, or I guess probably quarterly luncheons now.
Okay.
In the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so.
Okay.
I'll
I'm
get
willing
them.
to travel, so it's no
Yep,
problem.
so it's usually just a group of property tax professionals, most corporate and a lot of consultants as well. To see if he might have some interest in having you kind of come give some statistics on TDLR and kind of just share the same information that we get, but just it on in a public forum.
Be happy to.
If you'd be so kind. I will give that information to him probably tomorrow.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Russell. And so now that leads us to item 6, Executive Office. The overview of TDLR strategic plan for fiscal years 2019 through 2023. An overview of TDLR's legislative appropriations request for fiscal years 20 to 21, and also the communication outreach statistics. And this being a year or a period where we are in session, but you guys have a lot going on these days.
It's starting to heat up.
Yeah. So there we go.
Carla James, TDLR. I think that you were probably provided some information about our strategic plan at your last meeting, but I'm not sure that you got any information on our budget. So as the same as the strategic plan. Agencies are required to submit a budget request for the next 2 years just before session, and we did so. We asked for a couple of extra items this time, and those are funds to create a new licensing system. What you all looking at our internet website and the portal where folks apply and renew for licensure don't see is that we have 9 different licensing systems sitting on the back end, and that requires our staff to know 9 different systems and slows things down considerably. I will also say that those systems don't play well together. Some of them are fairly young, and then there's others my age. So we have requested the authority to build a new system. And the Senate has given us the money on that side. The House has not, so we've got a little bit of work to do. Our second exceptional item was to create a small human trafficking team. And as I give this report to each board and council, I get that puzzled look of, what? What do you all have to do with human trafficking? We're in a unique situation at TDLR where we have inspectors that go into a lot of facilities. That is our statutory authority to do so, and we may notice odd things while we're in there. Facilities where people, it looks like people are living there and they shouldn't be. Odd situations where things just aren't right. And I don't want to confuse anybody. We're not authorized, nor do we plan on being authorized to arrest people. That's not our job. But those odd things that we notice, we can report to local law enforcement, and they can take the appropriate action. So this is a directive by the governor and by the Attorney General of Texas, so we're following suit with that and have requested some resources to be able to address those items, provide information, and kind of round up information for a lot of different entities so that we can provide that. Even yesterday, I saw a soundbite on the news where the Senate has appropriated, I think, somewhere in the arena of $87 million for human trafficking. So it's a big initiative across the state. So we're one of many entities that are going down that road. So that basically does it for our budget. We haven't started budget hearings yet. Session started a couple weeks ago. There's those of us in the agency who like session. I'm one of those odd folks. So this is the fun time every 2 years. I believe Brian's the same way, so we're like giddy little kids right now. We'll see if we're still laughing at the end of session after working many hours. But TDLR is very active because we have so many programs. So we provide constant updates on the bills that are being filed that we're watching. That's out on our website. We will send you a link to that so you can watch it as well, and we put weekly updates out there. And then we don't usually schedule advisory or council meetings during the legislative session. That will probably follow the same route for you all. And we will provide a full update after session in your next council meeting. So I think that leaves me with the communication outreach. And this is related to y'all's page on our website. Over the last 6 months, we've seen 11,522 page views for an average of 62 a day.
Can I say that I love your glasses? My wife
Why,
would
thank you.
My wife would kill for those.
I'll tell you where I got them afterwards for a
okay.
whopping $15. I don't really need them. They just look awesome on TV. I was told by my mother-in-law when I showed them to her this weekend, I'm not known for being overly girly, and she said, I thought they were fake. They don't look anything like you. So I'm going to have to get some fake ones to wear around all the time as well. Thank you for that compliment. 67% of the visitors to the website were from a desktop computer, 30% from a smartphone, and 3% from a tablet. And the top reasons for visiting were pre-license education list, FAQs, our forms, exam information, and then continuing education. So those are the stats from the website, read to you with my awesome glasses on, and I am so happy to answer any questions you may have.
Carl, I've got one question. I know I'm interested and Deborah's interested, and I'm sure our other members are as well, but have we confirmed yet if our license is staying with TDLR? Or?
We don't have any confirmation on anything yet. Yeah. It's really so early in the process. It's 140 days, and most of the heavy lifting happens in March, April, and May. So we've got a little bit of time before we're going to know anything. And as we track those bills, we'll keep updates on them, whether or not they're moving into committee, all kinds of information. And we have links on each bill that's been filed that we're watching that will take you directly to a website that will show you all of the actions. But at this point, it's so early to tell. I couldn't promise anything one way or the other.
So does sunset usually put in a certain, like, quarter of the session?
Well, Sunset will file a bill,
Yeah.
and then we'll track that as well.
Okay.
I haven't seen any bills come out of Sunset yet. I'm looking at my guy who tracks everything, Jeff, and it's a little bit early even for Sunset
Yeah, yeah.
to file any bills. They've got a good amount of time left to get them in the hopper.
Deborah Balkum, is there anything we can do to?
Well,
keep our
I certainly
license
won't
TDLR?
advocate any lobbying. I think whatever action the profession deems is appropriate, y'all just follow what you want to have done and talk to the appropriate people. From the perspective of an agency, and this is where my country comes in, we don't really have a dog in that hunt until it's decided what TDLR will or won't do. So we stand at the will of the legislature, and whatever they decide they want us to do, we will gladly take on, or any departures. Just to watch the bills. I mean, that's kind of what we do at this point. But again, if there's something that the industry wants to do, we don't advocate for or against it. So that's a really not a very answer for you. I realize that.
No, it's very clear, actually.
Clear as mud?
You're, yeah, apolitical, don't care, we just do what we're told.
Pretty much it. Yeah, pretty much it.
Is that everything? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, Ken Parsons, I'm a little bit confused, which doesn't surprise most people, but I was under the impression that the Sunset Commission met last November.
Mm-hmm.
And they were supposed to put together some sort of a program as to what they were going to present.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any clue what was in that program? with
Well, that's
regard
the
to
bill that they
our
haven't
group?
filed yet.
They
So
have not filed?
That's accurate. So the decisions get made prior to session and sometimes even after it starts. And then agencies await the bill that is written by the Legislative Council at the request of the Sunset Commission. We have not seen any of those documents yet. So until those come out, the recommendations are the recommendations, but firmly what will happen after session is complete and a bill is completed will not be known to us until those bills are filed.
Okay. Did
So-
they have access to the feedback that you received at your meeting? When was that meeting, Deborah? Back in the fall, we had a meeting and several people were at that meeting and
Sunset should be posting their documents. I believe they're already out there to see the decision documents, what was decided and what wasn't. I'd be happy to visit with you after the meeting
Okay,
and show
very
you
good.
exactly where those are at.
thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Does anyone have anything else? Thank you very much.
You bet.
With that, we will move to item G, which want to provide plenty of time for discussion if there is discussions or questions or ever. I'm sure Mark will be happy to answer. But it was something that a lot of time and effort and examination was done. And this relates to discussion and possible recommendation of regarding proposed rule amendments to 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 66, 6610, 6620, 6621, 6625, 6670, and 66.80. The proposed amendments are being implemented to reflect consistency with statutory language contained in Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1152. These changes actually update references and clarify licensing and regulatory provisions. And so, Mark, if you want to expand on that, please do.
Thank you. For the record, Mark Gladney, General Counsel's Office. This agenda item is a culmination of the work that was done by the Rules Workshop, which included Ms. Boscom, the chair, and Mr. Catane. What we're going to be asking for today is the product of the work product. We're asking for you all to recommend adoption of this rule package to the commission. And as was stated, the proposed amendments and repeals that are being implemented are to be consistent with the changes that were made in the Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1152. And part of the process, the product of those processes was to update references, clarify licensing requirements, and regulatory provisions. As far as public comments were concerned, the proposed rules were published in the Texas Register on November 16th of 2018 for the public to weigh in on the rule package that's before you. The public comment period closed December 16th of 2018, and the department received no comments during the 30-day public comment period. So the department's recommendation at this particular point is to ask for you to recommend adoption of the rule package as proposed, and there's an effective date of these rules, assuming that y'all recommend to adopt and the commission adopts the rule package as proposed. The effective date would be April 1st of this year.
This is the whole thing that we discussed at the last, our last meeting, where we discovered we'd been doing things which actually were not correct, based on some of the rules and regs, right? That you and, right?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So we had a lengthy discussion about this.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Mhm. Yeah.
okay, good.
And that was to get your okay to publish back
Yeah.
then, and I believe that was in the October meeting.
Right.
And then, of course, we went through the process I described earlier,
Okay.
where they were on the register for 30 days, and we didn't get any comments, and usually I take that as a very good sign that people in your industry are quite happy with the changes that were made.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we discussed this at great length.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think we agreed at the last meeting, so do we just make a motion?
That's what I'm fixing to call for.
Oh, go ahead.
And can I get a motion on the approval of the proposed rule changes? Motion by Mr. Paul Pennington, and can I get a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Ms. Deborah Baucom.
And for clarification's sake, this is a motion to recommend adoption of the rule package to the commission.
That is correct. Do you need me to state that, or no? But yes, that is.
He's
that
a
is-
lawyer, I think he does.
I just want to be clear for the
You are
record.
correct, Mark.
Yes.
Will you do one thing for me?
Sure.
Just for my own understanding. On where we're going from 2 years, where we're in a 1 year period right now. When will we flip the switch, and when will those CEUs actually, I guess, get caught up? And it's probably not a question for you, it might be for our education folks. She'll probably know, Lorraine will probably know better than you, but when will that actually flip? Because I'm trying to rationalize it.
I think it's written.
It's in the rule. The March 1st of 2019 is kind of the cutoff of time.
Okay.
For that.
Okay.
So anybody who's renewing prior to or on or before May 1st
Yeah.
is going to be under the old
Okay.
CU
That
requirement.
answers my
and
question.
everything after.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding was that anyone who applies for renewal
After,
after
yeah.
will then not get a new
Right.
renewal date until 2 years later.
Okay, that's,
Yeah. And it's my understanding that notices were sent out last year to let folks know that this change is coming relating to the amount of CE credits from 12 to 24.
that was the biggest, that was the best answer. If it's going to be a certain date, then after that, anything
Yeah.
after that is under this. Okay.
And we want to make sure people have enough time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, Bill Green, just real quick, I know the hours are, if you renew before May, it'll say 12 hours, but how about the time frame? Will it be 2 years after that you have to
You'll have an increase. Basically, it's going to double the CE, but it's going to be basically the same, 24 over 2 years. Right now, it's 12 over 1.
Right, but so like buying a license renewed tomorrow, it really does, and I sent it in last week.
Oh,
So,
really?
is that gonna be for 2 years or 1 year?
Well, according to the rule as proposed, you're prior to May 1st, so it's still going to be under the 12-year, 12 credit.
12 credit.
12 credit, yeah.
1 year? All right. My 2 year won't start, or anybody else's, till after May.
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Any questions? Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that leads us to item H, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we got to vote.
Yeah, so we got a motion from Mr. Paul Pennington to implement the rules, and a second from Deborah. Can I get a vote towards that? Also,
Aye.
Aye. And it passes unanimously. Motions carry, and it will be implemented as noted. That moves us to item,
We didn't do something.
I think I just want to be clear that the motion is to recommend adoption of the rules to the commission.
that is correct.
Okay. And, you know, the effective date on that will be April 1st of
As
this year,
written.
but that's something that we'll take care of internally.
I probably didn't say as written, but it should be
As
as
written,
written. Yeah, yeah.
You want to, I will say it. You want me to say it?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
tell
just
me
to
what
be-
to
yeah,
say,
yeah,
and I'll
just to be clear, I think
Okay.
we should have a
Okay,
very clear
tell me
motion.
exactly what to say, and I'm going to say it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that,
To recommend adoption to the commission of the proposed rules as presented.
recommend adoption of the
Proposed rules.
proposal as.
As presented.
As presented.
And can we get a second? And a second from Ms. Deborah Buckle?
That's what you call boots.
And can we
What
get
is
a
it?
vote?
Belt and suspenders.
Aye.
Belt.
We're good.
Okay, thank you.
That rule is really in there now.
Wow.
No going back.
Hey, there you move it.
Thank you, Mark.
You guys are gonna lose $15.
Yeah, you're gonna have to, it's just killed your budget right there. And that goes to item H, recommendations for agenda items for the next council meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
at our last meeting, I brought up a issue about the CMI designation having exemptions. They have these exemptions. And I went into a lengthy talk about that, whereas CMI is that designation is a tremendous designation. It doesn't have any specificity to the state of Texas. And that I wanted to, and I asked the staff, is it possible through an interpretation of rule, or how do we need to modify the way it is currently to change it, that if you have a CMI, great, you don't have to take the hours and all that, you gotta take the test. That is,
Mr.
There's-
Pennington?
Yes.
Mary Winston.
Yes, ma'am.
I do recall that conversation. And part of the statistics that we didn't go into in the standard report, but our licensing manager does have those statistics that she can come up and read off to you about CMIs and where that comes from, that ability for the department to issue utilizing that designation as CMI. So Tarsha has numbers, and if you would start, and I interrupted probably too much last time, but we did look into this.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And before we get started, Mark Gladney, General Counsel's Office, we did have a little discussion about this prior to the meeting. So it's not really on the agenda, so I'd kind of like to keep the discussion with regard to that somewhat limited. We can talk offline, because we have put our combined brain power on this, and I think we have an explanation
Yes,
for you.
and
But do you
we-
want to just talk to me after the meeting?
We
I
can
do,
that, too.
that we can do that, but I
Okay, that's
do
fine.
want to give you, because we did couch this as statistics.
Okay, that's
Because you did have a question as to the number of CMIs that are PTCs that had that designation. And at the time, we were like, we'll get that for you,
Yeah.
but it didn't get on the agenda. That is a statistic. So it did come in after we had all of our other reports filed, but I just wanted Tarsha to be able to give that to you.
But as far as the interpretation
any
of the rule,
Yeah.
as far as the interpretation of the rules in question,
Yeah.
we should probably talk about that
Yeah,
offline.
absolutely. I'm not going to say a word.
All right.
But we can still make it an agenda item for our next,
Sure,
Yes, we
absolutely.
can.
Yes.
yeah. And I would encourage us probably to do that, if I don't have any No objections to that. I'm sorry.
Tarsha Red, licensing manager. So we have a total of 166 PTCs with the CMI designation that's expired and active licenses.
161, you said?
166.
Okay.
But there are currently 123 active licenses with the designation. So some people may still renew their license, or they may, remain inactive. We don't know that part, but there are currently 123 of the 1,806 total population that we currently have.
Yep.
Okay? And I'll have more information for you offline. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mary Winston. I bugged the crap out of Tarsha, okay? So this is me. I mean, and so it's my fault. I'm sorry, Tarsha, because I did. I'm like, okay, what is this? I was out of the office for stuff, so trying to catch up. And so I wanted to, after I bugged the crap out of her, to have her actually have an opportunity to say something out of all the information that I made her look up. So sorry about that.
You weren't the only one who was bugging her.
She'll let you take her to lunch.
Yes, it's a date. Yes, she will.
Flat tire.
Well, Mr. Chairman, since we're on the discussion of agendas for the next council meeting, I'd like to put on that agenda.
Okay.
A discussion of an exemption for those holding the CMI designation from the PTC or the senior PTC exam.
Okay.
No, they should take the exam.
Yeah. But not the education courses.
That was, they're exempt from that. I just want them to take the exam.
Okay, if there's, anybody else that would like to second that being
I'll
added to
second
the?
that.
Okay, so Paul Penning has made that recommendation as an agenda item, looking at the exemption of the PTC and the SPTC CMIs to the exam, and seconded by Mr. Bill Green as an added agenda item. So that would be great discussion. And are there any other items that we need to discuss?
Getting back to what we talked about, Ken Parsons, the process update.
Yep.
For
Enforcement.
the enforcement division, how that's updated and how people are notified.
That'd be fantastic. Can I get a second to add that, the processes in training for enforcement, and what all is entailed in that?
A second.
Okay, and also another second from Mr. Bill Green on adding training from the enforcement division. Mr. Kim Parsons made the motion, and then Bill Green seconded that.
Right.
Agenda item. Is there anything else that we would like to add to the agenda? Seeing nothing, okay, do we want to go to item I, which is the discussion of date and time and location of our next council meeting?
You want to do, we did one in October.
Yep. Yep, and it's a pretty benign time for all of us.
Is that good for y'all?
More than likely, we can poll you closer to that time,
Okay.
unless you want to commit to an October date today.
Just-
Okay. Delia will be contacting you.
Do we need one at all to discuss any legislation or anything?
No, they
before
can't have meetings during the session.
Gotcha.
Well, we can
After-
have them,
yeah.
it's
No.
just, we don't have anything to tell you.
Yeah.
If we need something, if something comes up, which is, yes, beyond our control, and we need to chat around June, we'll set something then. But if nothing
I'll be
comes
here,
up.
so
Thank
don't
you,
worry about
Mr.
it.
Pennington. But tentatively, we'll just say that staff will poll you for a future date, not earlier than June.
And this is Mark Liney for the record. If there are any legislative changes that happen to come about, I may be contacting the work group with regard to having a meeting to possibly implement any of those changes that affect us, if that does come to pass.
Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated if you'd alert us if there is any new legislation that is going to directly impact us. And then we can see if there is a need for a new work group to discuss it and set a time.
Where are we on our enforcement matrix work group?
Great question.
Get ahead of the game, me too.
You got it right in front of you, don't you?
We actually have a printout. There's actually this is Stephen Dunson, there's actually a separate area on the TDLR website that has the list of violations, what qualifies for each class, class A, B, and C, and first offense, second offense, third offense.
Do we want to put that on the agenda for next time?
Sure.
so.
So just to, it's there,
Yeah,
but
the
we
work
want to
group
discuss
is
that.
Myself, Bill Green, and Paul Pennington.
So we'll do an enforcement work group update.
Okay.
Until that time, please note that it is on our website. You can take a look at
Yeah,
where we are
got
thus
it.
far.
Mary, do I need to add that and have it added as a?
A work group.
We've got it.
Yep. So I'd like to add that, the enforcement stats and all the work group update. Can I get a motion to add that?
So moved.
Deborah Baucom moves to add that, and can I get a second? Second. And a second by Mr. Ken Parsons. If there's nothing else, I move to adjourn. Staff, thank you so much for your time and your information and your work for us today. Greatly appreciated. And everybody have a great year. See you in October, hopefully.
Thank you.